Doreen reached over with a nearby stick and carefully disentangled the metal object. It was caught up in the heather from deep underneath, half buried and half twisted in the greenery. Luckily, both the cuffs were open and not click shut. Eventually, she broke them free and held them up for her neighbor to see. She snickered again and, trying for a straight face, asked, "Did you lose these?" Richard inspected the handcuffs, partially covered with what appeared to have once been a soft pink satin, only now they were soiled with dirt and stained over time. Embarrassed, he stared at her, his jaw dropping. "Those aren't mine," he squeaked, his face flushing bright red. "Well, maybe not," Doreen said. "They're pink. Maybe your wife's?" He was so irate it looked like he would stomp his foot. Instead, he spun on his heel and roared, "Get that nastiness out of my yard!" Then, when he reached his doorway, he looked back and said, "You probably planted them there." She stared at him in surprise. "Well, they're not mine, and it's obvious they've been here for a long time, long before I moved here. Who knew you were into kink behind closed doors?" He slammed his door in her face. She burst out laughing before mustering enough seriousness to leave. Calling her critters, she pushed the wheelbarrow with one hand and held the handcuffs with the other, still looped over the stick she'd poked them with. When she reached her house, she parked the wheelbarrow in her garage and took the handcuffs inside. She carefully laid them on a piece of paper towel and studied them. "Handcuffs in the heather," she said to herself. "Mac will never believe that." Not that she was ready to tell him. It definitely wasn't a police issue, but a sex story issue. And, of course, that raised all kinds of interesting questions. She'd never really been exposed to sex toys, so this offered a whole new level of research. And she also expected all kinds of issues when doing that research with her own laptop. She had decent virus checkers, but she was bound to end up on porn sites. Not exactly what she considered her daily reading. Although, if that was all she had for issues, then whatever. But relieved that her unpaid workday designated to helping the local police was more or less over, with the potential of a fire tamped down here at her house, and with Steve caught and hopefully at the police station, Doreen opted for a hot cup of tea at the creek. It amazed her how the soothing sound of the water perked up her spirits and gave her energy instead of draining her. Right now, she didn't really want too much energy because she was looking forward to an early bedtime tonight. And considering what she'd been through these last few days, a hot bath and an early night would be perfect. But she couldn't stop thinking about the handcuffs. What an odd place for them. Her neighbor had to be in his 70s. He had told Doreen that he had a wife, Cicely, yet Doreen had never seen Cicely. Doreen had heard that odd androgynous voice out in their backyard behind the tall wooden privacy fence every once in a while. So Doreen was never sure if she was speaking to Richard or to Cicely. And Doreen wasn't even sure that he was a he or that Cicely was a she. Even if a he, maybe Richard was homosexual. She didn't have any problem with that. But if the neighbor's partner was hiding away, that would explain why nobody ever saw them. In which case, maybe the handcuffs were theirs. She smirked at the idea. Something was very delightful about the thought of her grumpy, secretive neighbor with pink satin handcuffs. She relaxed by the creek, the setting sun highlighting the greens of the trees around her and her animals. It was truly a unique spot, which she was so grateful to have. She couldn't imagine living in those townhouses with people so close on either side. She appreciated this creek, with the wide-open spaces, a ready path, and a spot for the animals. And maybe, all because of the creek, she'd ended up finding a solution to so many cold cases. She certainly came here to find joy. She knew the media would hound her as she helped to solve each case, and that usually meant her front yard would be out of bounds again. Most of the time, the media didn't follow her to the backyard, but she couldn't guarantee they wouldn't. She didn't even want to contemplate how many cold cases this last case would close. At least, she hoped Annette Helmsman's deathbed confession would help close several of them. And now with Steve's involvement confirmed, that would be another matter resolved, if not two. And potentially a lot more. Once the authorities got digging into that stuff and checked out Steve's finances, who knew how many other women were paid to stay quiet? Doreen wondered if some of those women were still alive. Maybe they were buried on his property. Not to mention, who was the body they found burned to a crisp that they had first thought was Steve?